This is Duke University.
Global trade and environmental justice.
Human rights issues are still.
The term Ubuntu.
The Alien and Sedition Acts.
Is making inferential discovery.
The importance of an archive.
The John Hope Franklin Center.
Perhaps the best way to describe Professor Guthrie Ramsey Jr. is through the word or the phrase Renaissance man. Author, musician, jazz composer, professor, baseball player, curator, and new granddad. Guthrie Ramsey joins us this afternoon to talk about the legacy of pianist Bud Powell, to talk about his curation of the Apollo Theater exhibition at the Smithsonian Institute, and the impact of a little baby girl, a new granddaughter, on his life and his music. And later we're joined by Esther Iverem, founder and managing editor of SeeingBlack.com, a groundbreaking online site that is celebrating its 10th anniversary next month. I'm Mark Anthony Neal, and this is Left of Black. Welcome to Left of Black. I'm Mark Anthony Neal, and we're joined this afternoon by Professor Guthrie Ramsey Jr., known to his friends simply as Guy, who is the Edmund J. and Louise W. Kahn Term Professor of Music at the University of Pennsylvania. How are you doing this afternoon, Guy?
I'm great, man. Great to be here, and I'm so happy to see you in cyberspace.
Yeah. Guy is also the author of Race Music, Black Cultures from Bebop to Hip Hop, University of California Press, 2003, and the forthcoming In Walked Bud, Earl Bud Powell and the Modern Jazz Challenge. And let's start there. Tell us about the new book, Guy.
Well, I've got some readers' reports in hand, and I've been given some really great directions on how to make the book better, and I'm determined to have this book off my desk by the end of April. So you know that drill, right?
Yes,
you know,
yes.
You get all these smart people weighing in, and you have to honor that and try to help yourself out, as it were. You know. So
you're a pianist yourself. Talk a little bit about what attracted you to Bud Powell, you know, to do a kind of book-length study as you're doing.
Well, the book is based on my dissertation. How often academics, their first book is their dissertation flipped into a book. I wrote my dissertation on Bud Powell, but I chose not to publish the book before race music because in my field of musicology, it's really easy to get pegged as a jazz scholar, you know, that. And I wanted to, make it known that I worked on more than jazz. So I put the Bud Powell away and did race music. Now, what initially got me into Bud Powell is that as a pianist coming up on the scene, his name was often one of the first ones that the older jazz musicians told me I needed to listen to. So listen to Bud, you know. So I, just try to combine the scholarly and the musical interest and work on him.
You are a Chicago native, and that's part of the brilliance of your first book, Race Music, the way that you weave these incredible scholarly and theoretical insights about the history of Black music, but they're also very personal as you're bringing bits and pieces of growing up in Chicago and of course your family and all of that. And one of my favorite memories of Guy Ramsey, he's at the Experience Music Project a few years ago, and you did a presentation from the book, and the Gap Band's Outstanding came on, and you did a little, for the audience, show people a little bit about the Chicago Stepper set.
Oh my goodness, I don't remember that.
that whole moment, and folks kind of laugh when they hear R. Kelly on Step in the Name of Love, the remix, talk about, it's not just a dance, it's a culture. But talk a little bit about what Stepper set culture is like in Chicago and why particularly it resonates as it has in this particular historical moment, beyond the confines of Chicago.
Wow, Mark, is amazing. I can't quite remember stepping at a scholarly event, but wow. Okay, thanks for reminding me. Well, I've lived in a number of places in my life. I've lived and been around Black communities in these places: Santa Barbara, around Detroit, New York City, Boston, uh, and of course Chicago. And what strikes me is that these cultures, the urban Black spaces, usually have a social couples dance that kind of marks their tribe, if you will. And of course, in Chicago, stepping is the stepping culture is what Chicagoans do, you know. And so I was trying to at once capture some of the very localized energies of the Black community that I was raised in, but also try to speak to the kind of universal aesthetic that all these Black cultures have across the board. So someone from Detroit, when they're doing their hand dance, or in Philadelphia, it's the bop culture, you know. And of course, I had to learn how to. For me, I had to learn how to do the bop when I got to Philly. You know, I tried to learn the bop before I tried to see what other faculty members were on campus. So, yeah, I just feel that when you get into those deep pockets of culture that are not, many of them are not even mass mediated.
Right.
Yet,
Right.
you know what I mean? But yet they're doing their local culture to mass mediated music. So that's what really fascinated me, and I just wanted to share that with my readers, because I think it's central to understanding how meaning is generated in Black music.
You're watching Left of Black. I'm Mark Anthony Neal, and we're joined by Professor Guthrie Ramsey Jr., Guy Ramsey, the Edmund J. and Louise W. Kahn Term Professor of Music at the University of Pennsylvania. You were one of the many contributors to a book that recently came out, you know, looking at Nas's debut CD, Illmatic. And your piece, again, resonated for me in particular ways, because part of it was a story about this relationship between father and son. And you're working on a new album now. You have your band, Dr. Guy's Musicology, the Q instead of the C in the middle of musicology. Your first album, Why the Q, came out in 2008, and you're working on a new album now, the Colored Waiting Room. And I want to ask you about the title of that for a moment. But this is also a recording in which the voice of your daughter, appears on the album as she sings a song about your granddaughter.
Right. I'm very interested in how our culture, as you are too, you know, because that's one of the things that I love about your work, is that you often reflect out loud, you know, about these relationships, you know, between, you know, with your dad, and what sensibilities he may have passed down to you, and then, you know, all of the challenges of being a parent and trying to raise African American children in today's climate.
Right.
So, being a musician, I came up in a kind of musical environment in the neighborhood and all that. And although I can't claim that my own children were raised in the same, working class to working poor environment that I was raised in, there were some sensibilities I wanted to pass down to them. And one of them was this idea about, communal music making. And so, I have three kids. Everybody had to play something, you had to, learn what it meant to, do the discipline of music, and then to stand in front of people and present what you've worked on. And so Bridget is, my son is he makes beats. He went from cello to beat making, and I don't think cello is coming back in his life. But the other one is who I thought she was a really good violinist. Studying with someone in the Detroit Symphony when she was 6 or 7 years old.
Wow.
She never. After she put it down as a teenager, she never picked it back up. But she is a major music consumer. She will call me from the Beyonce concert and say, "Hey, you need to be here, Dad." But my baby, who I thought frankly, was the one who did not have the attention span or discipline. It turns out to be the serious musician of the crowd. And it was really very touching for me to write a song for my granddaughter, who's now 14 months old, and to have my daughter sing. So I'm trying to push that thing down to the generations, and hopefully it'll mean something to her that her aunt sang that song to her, and that her grandfather wrote it for her and all that. So I guess I'm trying to in some ways duplicate something through that act of musicking.
Yeah.
That that you and I both came up with in the community. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. You're watching Left to Black. I'm Anthony Neal. We're here with Professor Guy Ramsey, University of Pennsylvania music professor, author of the book Race Music, and the forthcoming In Walked Bud, about the life and times and music of Earl Bud Powell. One of the projects you've worked on recently, you're a co-curator of an exhibition at the Smithsonian that opened last year and it's currently at the City Museum of New York. Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, How the Apollo Theater Shaped American Entertainment. Talk a little bit about that project. I mean, what was it like, as the academic to go in and curate this really important exhibition about, the significance of the Apollo Theater in Harlem as not just an African-American institution, but really an American institution?
Well, that experience really broadened me out in lots of great ways. I fell into the project. I was on a panel with one of the curators of at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which, as you know, will break ground in 2015. And she wrote me an email and asked if I knew anybody with museum experience and who had a deep, interest and knowledge in American music. And I didn't think a lot about it until I just showed it to my wife, and then she said, who's Kelly Jones, an art historian, and she said, "Wow, I think you could do this." And being the husband I am, yeah, I could do this. But it was a really, with the two things about it that really I thought really changed me. One was that it got me to think beyond the expressive practice of music. In other words, I had to think about it in context with comedy, with dance, and so on. And the other thing is that I had to learn and appreciate that the public really does want to see things like LL Cool J's Boombox or Celia Cruz's Dress, or those are the things that I don't really fetishize those objects in the same way that the lay audience would. But to see people go through an exhibition and to take their kids and to show them objects, it showed me that sometimes you have to think beyond your own sensibilities and think about what a broader audience might appreciate.
You're watching Left to Black. I'm Anthony Neal. We're here with Professor Guy Ramsey. A few years ago, you married into, I guess, what we'll just call the first family of African American arts and letters. You married Kelly Jones, of course, who is the daughter of Amiri Baraka. What has that experience, been like for you? Here you have this figure, who we've all studied. All of us have spent, very quality, intimate time with a book like Blues People, and of course the poetry and the Dutchman. I mean, all these things, and you look up one day and wow, that's like your father-in-law.
Yeah, right. Yeah, man. Well, you're absolutely right about that, because you remember when we all discovered Blues People in the library.
Absolutely.
And wow, they were like, wow, look at this.
It was like this kind of moment. It was like, this is something I could do? Really?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. It's inspiring. And And then since then, of course, it's sort of like a passport
Yeah.
to Black cultural studies, if
Well,
you will.
you know,
You can't.
whenever young folks, you know, say, I want to learn something about the music, how can I, and you just hand them the copy of the book. And it's like, you know,
Right.
spend some time with this, come talk to me again in a couple of months, and we'll go from there.
Right. Well, I met Kelly at a book signing of Farrah Griffin's, Bob O'Meally, and Britt Edwards's collection, Uptown Conversations. So
Right.
I'm at the book party, and I noticed Kelly, and she didn't notice me. But guys, we're looking at, we're just appreciating the surroundings all the time. So, we were introduced by Deb Willis, who is, of course, Kelly's great friend, and
Deb's son Hank, was on a few weeks ago.
right, yeah, man, he's so brilliant. Wow, that work is so great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I spoke to Deb for maybe a minute or so. She says, I have somebody I'd like you to meet. So we were introduced and we exchanged cards and everything, and it really didn't dawn on me. I didn't really make the connection immediately, but when I did, I thought, well, okay, this is kind of interesting. But the main thing that I could say about it is that, you have someone who's deeply into visual culture, as Kelly is, and of course, cultural critique. And then, coupled with my interest as so we're both historians of expressive culture, but she also curates and I, play music. So there are these ways that we're always teaching each other about, listening and singing and all of that. And, the whole family is really kind of amazing. Kelly's mom, Hetty Jones, is just, quite frankly, one of the most brilliant cultural critics, that I know. I teach her book, How I Became Hetty Jones. We've had a couple of performances together, when she's doing her beat chick thing, I have let's pull a jazz trio together, and we, throw down like that. And it's just been very rich and just a really rich relationship,
And you were able to collaborate with her. Kelly has a new book coming out this May, I-Minded, Living and Writing Contemporary Art by Kelly Jones, published by Duke University Press in May of 2011. And what was it like to work with her in a more kind of traditional and formal intellectual mode?
Well, it was really great. That was one of the first things she did, was to give me an assignment. At the time, she was curating her exhibition for the Studio Museum of Harlem, Energy Experimentation, Black Artists and Abstraction. And she wanted a piece in the catalog on free jazz. And so I began to, just follow her around when she's doing her curating duties, going to artist studios and going through old storage spaces and trying to choose pieces for the thing, and even storage spaces at the MoMA and the Whitney. So what I really learned from that experience is that, you have these cast of characters in the visual art world. You have dealers and artists and gallery owners, curators and critics. And I was always comparing that with the world that I knew of, record collectors, producers,
right,
musicians, and all of that. So I'm constantly trying to make the connections. And it really opened me up in a lot of ways. In fact, in the Bud Powell book, I do refer to two ideas that I have learned from the art world, and that is the importance of the assemblage, and also abstraction, because I started thinking about abstract visual art as a corollary to things that were going on in the bebop period, with Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, and all of them.
You're watching Left of Black. We're joined this afternoon by Professor Guthrie Ramsey Jr., Guy Ramsey to his friends. You mentioned a few minutes ago, Guy, that you've recently become a granddad. Is granddad still playing baseball on the weekends?
I had to retire my number. I had to retire my number. You know, the you know the fun thing and the bad thing is that, you know, you stick your hand out there and try to catch a ball, and if you're in any way injured, you know, at the age I am, the injuries just kind of sit around for about 6 months.
That's right.
You can't. There's no such thing as just shake it off. It doesn't shake off.
Which, you know, which raises, I think, and this will be my last point. I mean, you're obviously not just a baseball fan. I mean, it's kind of more than a baseball fan that you were out there, you know, into your 40s, right?
Oh yeah.
You know, still playing baseball, and of course, you go to any baseball stadium today, on any level, look in the stands and then look on the field, and what you don't see are black men playing baseball. You know, it's almost becoming a lost part of our experience. You know, much the same way, you know, that we're losing almost a connection to jazz, right, and other forms of black expressive art. You know, if you had to come up with a quick strategy on how to get, you know, baseball to be at the center of black life again, I mean, what would you do?
Well, I think you could start volunteering. Well, interestingly, I should say that in my neighborhood of Bed-Stuy, that you still see black youth in the inner city. You know, there is a comeback coming on. There's right down the street from me. There we have a park, and there is you know, you see, you know, little black and Latino boys playing baseball. It's really great. You know, we're defending baseball players now. You find them on the golf course with me. So that's the new thing.
You've been watching Left to Black, and we've been joined this afternoon by Professor Guy Ramsey, who is the Edmund J. and Louise W. Kahn Term Professor of Music at the University of Pennsylvania, author of Race Music, Black Cultures from Bebop to Hip Hop, University of California Press, 2003, and the forthcoming In Walked Bud, Earl Bud Powell and the Modern Jazz Challenge. And real quick, Guy, you know, when is this new album coming out?
Everything is April 30th. I'm going to finish everything. So expect the CD to be out by early summer. I'm about 90% finished with the tracking, and then the editing, mixing, and mastering, and then we'll be out. I'm so excited about it. You know, I've got singing on this CD, which is great, and a local jazz singer in Philadelphia, Denise King. Just a lot. There's a lot of great things on it, I think, and hopefully people will enjoy it.
Thanks for joining us this afternoon, Guy.
It's been an honor, man. Thank you so much for having me. I have much admiration and respect for this format. I just find it just really makes me proud to see how you are reaching so many people with all of the ideas and all of the connections that you're making. And it's just what we need. And you're really my role model, really, for how to get things of integrity out to the people who need to hear them.
Well, we appreciate that here at Left to Black, Guy.
Okay, my pleasure.
Take care. Good afternoon. You're back here on Left to Black. I'm Anthony Neal, and we're here this afternoon with Esther Iverem. How are you doing this afternoon, Esther?
I'm fine. Anthony Neal, also known as Man.
So you are about to celebrate the 10th anniversary next month of your online site, seeingblack.com. Much has changed in the last 10 years. I mean, when you started Seeing Black, print media was still trying to wrap their heads around the internet and what it meant to be able to offer free content. Writers were still getting paid per word in some cases, you know, for words. You know, 10 years later, you know, writers aren't getting paid very much to write. The Huffington Post isn't paying people anything, in fact, you know, or at least not many of their writers. And of course, you know, print media has fully wrapped their head around the power of the internet. And of course, we're now dealing with social media. Take us back 10 years ago to what you were hoping to accomplish when you founded seeingblack.com.
Well, at the point that I started seeingblack.com, the landscape was very different. We were still kind of new to the internet. As far as blacks online, I think there was like Net Noir.
Wow.
There were like kind of some listservs in their early beginnings of listservs. So I remember one called the Black Radical Congress. My good friend McConnie Temba Nixon told me recently about another either listserv or site called Techno Bro. And these are some of the things that I'm actually finding out more about right now. I want to definitely, if we can track down Techno Bro, I want to have him at our anniversary on April 9th here in DC. And well, what I wanted to do was to have a place where we could have that really celebrated our full existence, our art, our media, our culture, our politics. And a lot of what was online at that time either excluded us or kind of cast us in a very kind of narrow range, the same as mainstream media. So you saw there were some hip hop sites, there were some popular culture sites.
Yeah, I guess Russell Simmons' Hip Hop 360 was still, in existence in those early days. Yeah.
Right, and everything in our lives didn't come through this vein of hip hop, and I knew that our lives, our culture, our art, our media, our politics were a lot broader than that. And I really wanted a site that kind of reflected that. So even though at the time I was doing film reviews for BET.com, and I was very interested in film, and I'm still interested in film as an important media that captures our lives and says something about society, I knew that there were other subjects. There was music outside of hip hop. There was dance. There was theater. There was visual arts. There were all types of things in terms of the culture. And then outside the culture, there were important discussions to be had about media and politics and our health and our spirituality, all those things, because we're full of people. Yet in the media, which I had been a part of, as an adult, all my working life, working as a journalist, the media often didn't present us that way. And that was one of the reasons why I wound up leaving the Washington Post, because I felt like it was either pathology or ridicule. It was one or the other. We were either a joke or we were just, sick. And I really wanted to get beyond that limited range of how Black people were depicted. We're talking about late 90s, early 2000s.
You're watching Left of Black. We're here with Esther Iverem of SeeingBlack.com. She is the founder and editor of SeeingBlack.com. The date April 9th is of some significance to you in terms of the founding of the site. Talk a little bit about what that date meant and what it recognizes.
Well, April 9th is also the birthday of Paul Robeson, and it has a lot of different meanings, but I wanted to recognize this just tremendous, artist, intellectual, activist, who, lived his life really in struggle and sacrifice, but in love, I think, for his people and for his country and for the world. I first read about Paul Robeson when I was, I guess, in high school, and I grew up in Philadelphia, and I know he lived his later years there, fascinated by him. But as it turns out, one of my last assignments at the Washington Post was doing a piece on the centennial of his birth. And I ran into such political problems trying to get a piece in the paper that I thought really represented him. And it actually kind of wound up, it kind of helped me leave that world of journalism, because I wouldn't write a piece that said that Paul Robeson wound up on the wrong side of history. And I don't believe that then. I didn't believe that then, and I don't believe that now. And I think that history, all that remains to be seen, and its history is bearing itself out. We see plenty right now. So I was really happy to launch the site on that date and kind of keep that as our birth date. And so that's the significance of it.
Let me stay on Robeson for a second. I mean, Robeson, you know, at his peak in the 50s, at his political peak at least, mentored a generation of black performers, Harry Belafonte, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee, and of course these folks, Belafonte is still going strong as is Ruby Dee. And we can see the influences of Robeson and Belafonte on folks like Danny Glover, someone like Randall Robinson, who of course is an actor, but of course, you know, still maintains that activist spirit. Where else do you see the spirit of Paul Robeson in contemporary black performers?
Well, I guess I would really have to think about that. I know I gave some thought to it the other day when I was watching the HBO production of Thurgood.
Yeah,
and I
Laurence
thought
Fishburne,
about
yeah.
how, the Laurence Fishburne, and I also remember when I was in college seeing a Broadway production about Paul Robeson.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking about these one-man shows that we've had that have kind of depicted these, you know, larger-than-life historical figures. I also thought that it was kind of Laurence Fishburne's most important role I've seen him in. I've enjoyed him in other roles. You know, I kind of kept joking to myself about how much, you know, Morpheus was up there on the stage, you know. But I really, yeah, you know, I really thought that this was an important role for him. And I think that this kind of art is something that, you know, is the promise, is kind of like the fruit of, I think, what the black filmmakers wanted to have when they started the new wave in 1986. An art that would, productions that would kind of represent our fuller lives, you know. And I think that I watched that, it made me think about Robeson's legacy. You know, we may not have it in all of our art, but when you look at even many of the artists that you have on your show, I think many of us, even if we're not performing artists, are inspired by the idea that we don't have to divorce our art from our politics. We don't have to you know, you don't have to try to hide your politics if you're a progressive person, if you care about the world, if you know, that art can include meaningful statements. That's how it becomes universal. You know, not you know, because of some themes that, you know, they try to force on you in high school, but because it really represents all of humanity, and some important struggles and truths and beauty that we are all confronting, you know, as human beings. So I see it a lot. It may not be apparent in the performing artists we necessarily see all, but it's there, you know, and very often those artists have a hard time becoming commercially big, or, you know, blowing up, as they say.
Yeah.
Because they are they have more message, they have more substance. And they're not just talking about, you know, drinking champagne or, you know, making it rain or whatever's, you know, going on.
We're here on Left of Black with Esther Iverem. This is Mark Anthony Neal, and we've been talking with Esther Iverem about her site, SeeingBlack.com, which celebrates its 10th anniversary next month, April the 9th. One of the most consistent features about SeeingBlack.com, Esther, are your film reviews. And it's an interesting kind of moment, because when we look at kind of entertainment journalism, you know, popular culture, popular media journalism, when it comes to music and it comes to literature, you know, many, you know, newspapers and online sites kind of go the way of Entertainment Weekly. You know, let's try to compress all these ideas into a 500-word article and call it an arts review. It seems that film may be the one place where we still have critics who get to write a little bit at length about, you know, what they're confronted with. I mean, a lot of that, I imagine, just simply has to do with the economic realities of the film industry. But here you are, a black film critic writing about film, writing about black film. And what we're seeing, of course, is a dearth of black films, being produced at this point in time. Think about, the stuff that you've been able to watch and write about in the 5 years since you published your last book. We Gotta Have It, 20 Years of Seeing Black Film at the Movies, 1986 to 2006. Which black films, have come out recently in the last couple of years have really kind of caught your attention and gives you hope, that black filmmakers are going forward in a way that's going to be useful for us, going into the future?
Oh, wow. I wish that I could, be on your show and tell you I had a lot of hope. What I think right now is that we're at the nadir, or maybe the very end of what we call the new wave of black film.
Kind of like hip hop during the Puffy era.
Place, we're kind of in a time when I think that a lot of people, a lot of actors, filmmakers are really trying to figure it out, and we're going to come to a new rebirth of black film, and it's going to be through independent film.
Yeah.
Last year we had Night Catches Us by Tanya Hamilton. Right. And she tried to look at kind of like the aftermath of the Black Panthers in Philadelphia. There is a filmmaker who I think is a protege of Spike Lee, actually, who really did an interesting film several years ago about the Confederate States of America, kind of parodying what would the United States be like if the South had won the Civil War. Right. And I wish I could remember his name right now. I'm sure that your crack production staff can help me out. But there was, it was a tremendous film, and it was funny and poignant and smart. And these are the types of films that I think we have to look forward to, but it's a hard road for the filmmakers, and it's a real challenge to the black audience, because if we say that we want hood films or comedy films or things that are just kind of like don't really feed us or make us think at all, then we have to support those films. And it's a little harder to support a film when it's not opening on thousands of screens, when it's not advertised so that we may know about it. We have to be smarter as an audience and figure out a way to support these films. So I see that happening. I'm hopeful. There are 2 films coming out this year that I'm really looking forward to seeing. One is by Ava DuVernay, and it's gotten a lot of traction at the Black Film Festival circuit. And another one is titled Muslim. Right. And I know it stars, I think, Danny Glover.
And Evan Ross, Dinah's son, yep. Right.
And they won't, these are good examples, because they won't be released all over the country all at once. There won't be big advertising budgets. You won't turn on your television and see, commercials. Hopefully, they can pick up a little of the, Tyler Perry strategy and at least advertise on Black radio and reach their audience that way. But I am looking forward to these movies, and I think that there are a boatload of Black filmmakers out there that are talented. They have scripts, and they just need a way to make their films and to get them out to the public.
To the audience.
And it's the money. It's the money in the way of it all, and the people who are able to green light these films in Hollywood. Of Hollywood have changed tremendously, so that studios aren't looking to make that $30 million grossing film anymore, which is kind of the neighborhood where our films were living. They're looking for, films that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if they can get a sequel or a third film out of that, that's even better. Right. So, you look at New Line Cinema, which released a lot of the Black films in the 90s and early 2000s. You have to remember, they went on and made the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Right. And that grossed like over $3 billion internationally.
Right.
So, we're talking about a whole different league of money making and profit. And, Black filmmakers, have to be able to survive in this new environment.
And that's,
I see a lot of, yeah.
it's an interesting point because on the one hand, when you think about Tanya Hamilton's film, one of the great strategies that she used is that the film was available, to download on iTunes, right? So folks who were never going to get a chance to see the film in a theater could at least be able to connect to the film. But you mentioned, Hollywood's strategy in terms of the money that they spend. So we look at an example like Black Swan, which cost $13 million to make, right? And it's probably going to turn a 10 times plus profit. And when we think about Black film, the one person who's been very successful in this regard has been Tyler Perry, who has consistently made films that cost anywhere between $5 and $15 million and then would triple and quadruple, the profit in terms of these films. How are you feeling about Tyler Perry? I know he's a complicated subject matter. I know we often have to divorce his skill as a filmmaker from his strategic use of his films in terms of being a businessman and being able to promote himself. But how do you feel about Tyler Perry as you're looking at the Black filmmaking landscape?
Well, feelings toward Tyler Perry have evolved quite a bit, actually. I remember at some point in the beginnings of the Medea movies, I kind of, I defended Tyler Perry a lot because I really saw, and I know that we differ a lot about this, but I defended him a lot because I saw that he was really tapping into an audience of, Black women,
right.
who really had been ignored by Hollywood.
Absolutely.
Who really hadn't seen a lot about their lives depicted on positive way, so that even though some people look at the films as being very anti-Black male in terms of some of the plots, many of the films kind of ended with a happy ever after for the woman. She found someone who wanted to marry her, that first movie, Diary of a Mad Black Woman, there were these lines that I don't know if I've ever heard any lines spoken by a Black man to a Black woman at the end of that film. He was like, what it was just beautiful. I think it was Shamar Moore and Kimberly Elise.
Right.
And, this was just a wonderful kind of happy ever after, which we don't usually get to see. So my feelings have really evolved a lot. I think that I was willing to kind of give him his process and recognize the positive things that he brought to the screen. I also recognized that I was really tickled by the character Medea, whereas many Black women were deeply offended by her. I thought that, she made me laugh. She kind of represented that kind of like around the way toughness that, a lot of Black women don't get credit for having. We came out of a whole spate of films about the community where men got to be tough. Well, this was like an older Black woman who got to be tough, but on her own terms. I love the line about, I believe in peace, be still. I keep peace still. It's stuff like that just like crack me up. And in a sense that I would like to see both better production and a wider range of themes.
Right.
I think that when he moved on to produce some of the Why Did I Get Married films,
right,
and then then Precious with Lee Daniels film this past year for Colored Girls, it really just became to seem to be like too much of the same thing. Right. Where you had these stories where there was really no redemption, I felt, for the characters. No, not that there always has to be, but I just think that I've started to feel clubbed over the head by Tyler Perry movies. And I could never really kind of walk away feeling like I didn't know how I felt, you know. So it's evolved a lot. I think that maybe he needs to tell his own story,
Yeah.
and get it
Yeah.
out of his system, and
Yeah.
and then maybe it would allow him to move on to some other themes.
Yeah. You're watching Left to Black. We're here with Esther Iverem, the founder and editor of SeeingBlack.com, which celebrates its 10th anniversary as an online site next month, April the 9th. One last thing while I have you, Esther. One of my favorite pieces that you wrote goes back to your days at the Washington Post, writing about Phyllis Hyman in the aftermath of her death.
Oh, yeah.
And I always, you know, I ask you this every time I see you, you know, are we ever going to see that Esther book on Phyllis Hyman? You know, do you think, and you know, it's, again, we've talked about this before, you know, the publishing companies will say there's no audience for it. But yet, you know, we in fact know that there is an audience for her story, right?
Exactly. Well, you know, I think I told you that I tried for many years to shop that proposal, letter, plea, you know, to, you know, various entities in New York, be they agents, directly to editors. And like you said, I would get that response that there was no audience. And, you know, that's a book I knew I could sell out of the trunk of my car.
Right,
you know,
right,
I could just go to
right.
like every church in D.C. and it would be a bestseller, you know, and every club, right? Hit the clubs Saturday night and hit the churches Sunday morning, right? But you know, at some point, you know, I had to kind of think, well, unless I'm going to get some type of, you know, fellowship
Right.
or something like that, if anybody's listening, hint, I'm not going to have the time to stop and, you know, get, you know, Phyllis's, you know, family while they're still here with us,
Right.
and you know, her agent or manager, all the people who she worked with, you know, and a lot of them are of that generation leaving us, you know,
Right.
some of them, you know, and I would just really like to, I'm still really very interested in her story as a story about a particular music, a generation, you know, her story as a woman. There's just so many parts to it that are, I think, important to my lifetime, you know, here, you know, and important to the lifetime of so many of us who, you know, post civil rights, I don't know what you want to call us, you know, I don't know, but, you know, who definitely heard her music coming of age, you know.
You've been watching Left to Black, and we've been here with Esther Iverem, the founder and editor of SeeingBlack.com, which celebrates its 10th anniversary, April the 9th, and make sure to send us all the information about the anniversary celebration. Esther?
Oh yeah, I can tell you now, you can, anybody, you know, who wants to come and help us raise some money too, you know, we're going to be on April 9th at 7 p.m. here in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Ethical Society on 16th Street Northwest. So we're going to have folks who are talking about the beginnings of, you know, Black online presence. Mm-hmm. You know, we're going to have music, dancing, stuff to auction like Black memorabilia, like some movie posters and things like that. That'll be fun. Well, you know, we're just trying to make it a fun evening, and, you know, just kind of celebrate, you know, being here, you know, still standing, you know, and in a very challenging environment, even for big corporate media. So for our little media to still be here and, you know, holding its own, and, you know, still getting, you know, props from people who say, you know, I like coming to your site. So I see stuff on your site I don't see anywhere else. And I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know that was happening. So even with, you know, a much changed online, even the Black online landscape, you know, I'm glad to celebrate our 10 years of, you know, still standing.
Well, congratulations on those 10 years, and let's hope for 10 more and many more after that. Thanks for joining us today, Esther.
Thanks for having me.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.